for attending our 7th virtual Naperville Business Network meeting. My name is Michelle Sherritt, and I am one of the owners and board members of the NBN Group. I also am a business owner of 2 local Naperville businesses. The first is Q Camp, which is a full service digital marketing firm. We specialize in creating user friendly websites. We do social media marketing, SEO strategy, email marketing campaigns, basically anything that you need for your business. My other business is Situated Research, which is a usability firm. That's where we bring in users to test video games, websites, and software. And we want to make them more user friendly. So we have PhDs on staff, including my husband, Dr. Matthew Sherritt, who specializes in usability. So we're able to look at menu structure and content structure of your websites, your software. As far as video games go, we try to make them more fun and more engaging and motivational, and also educational as well. So that's our background. A little bit about our groups before we get started. We started 5 networking groups back in 2008 on LinkedIn. And just last year, we trademarked all the names. So we have the Naperville, Northwest, North Shore, Oak Brook, and the Windy City Business Network. The Naperville group was the first group to become the largest online networking group on LinkedIn. And to date, we have over 2,000 people who are members on LinkedIn. As far as paid memberships, because we do have a paid membership program, we have over 215 paid members now. And even during the pandemic, we've been growing. So that's great. The Naperville Business Network, we meet the first Thursday of every month from 9:30 to 10:30, and we always have a guest speaker. The whole goal of our group is to help you to grow your business. And so we hope to accomplish that through networking opportunities as well as through our guest speakers and the topics that we present. Normally, we meet in person at the city building in Naperville. However, due to COVID, we've been doing this virtually since March on Zoom, and we will continue to do so throughout the rest of the year. We do offer many ways for our members to be able to advertise their businesses digitally as well through our paid membership. We also hold monthly happy hour events and quarterly formal dinners, and those will resume back in the spring. Until then, we're simply offering our members more advertising options. And we also have some pop-up evening Zoom events that we've been doing as well. I would also like to take this time to introduce you to the head of our marketing for all of the groups, Rhonda Seelinger. Thank you, Rhonda.
Sure. Welcome, everyone.
And today's Rhonda's birthday, so happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Rhonda helps us with our membership questions, group questions, lining up our speakers. She does all of our social media marketing, and she also moderates these virtual meetings for everybody who's on Zoom. So speaking of which, today's meeting is being recorded, and it's available on Facebook Live as well as Zoom here. So if you do have any questions, if you're on Zoom, just type it in your chat box. And when we get to Q&A, we'll go ahead and moderate those questions. And if you're on Facebook Live, just also write your questions in the comment section. Today's speaker is Dr. Jeff Van Meter, and I'd like to welcome Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you. And congratulations on a quick transition to online meetings, and it sounds like they're still very successful. So today we're going to talk about the 3 resistances that every leader faces, and I think you'll find it to be hopefully informative and also give you some ideas of maybe where you can take your own leadership. Don't you love being the boss? You know, you tell people what to do. Got that reserved parking spot, right? An assistant to serve your every need. Well, every business need, not to mention that high pay, expense account, and a bathroom with a shower in your office. Sweet. Yeah, if only, right? You know, I can remember way back a couple of years ago, freshly printed degree from Purdue University School of Engineering, a new job with Anderson Consulting, and a brand new shiny blue 1987 LeBaron convertible. I gave it to myself for graduation. You know, new job. So let's start by going into debt. But I love that car. The paint would sparkle in the sun. I'd put the top down, I'd drive to work. Every day after work, I'd drive home and I would wash that baby. And I mean it, every single day. I thought I had it made. I worked in the tallest high rise in downtown Indianapolis, wore a suit and tie every day. Now that we're in online meetings, I've ditched the tie and the jacket, but I was learning all about the consulting world. It was absolutely great. It was prestigious, well-paying, and constantly changing. I decided I was going to be a senior partner in 8 years because not only did partners make a lot of money, they were in charge. And I knew in my heart of hearts that their workday looked something like this. They were soaking up the sun, issuing orders every now and then. They'd come into the office, check on things, all while the money rolled in. But something happened. 4 years into my career, I was put on job search. Job search is a way of saying you got 30 days to find another job. And no, we don't need you to finish what you're working on. Thank you very much. So what does any self-respecting young person do when they're out of a job and their hopes and dreams have been dashed by corporate America? Well, today you develop an app. But 30 years ago, you went back to school. My mom said I should be a counselor because I was a good listener. So I did what mom said. I went back to school, studied psychology, threw a little theology on the side. Mama knows best, right? Many years of study later, I graduated and I started my own business. Again, I was ready to go. New degrees in hand, deep understanding of what makes people tick, and a great desire to get out of school and never go back. I started my psychology practice. I know it says psychiatric help, but but it was psychology. I can't prescribe medicine. After 6 months, I brought on my first employee, and soon another and another, and on till I had 25 people working for me. Take that, Anderson Consulting or Accenture or whatever you call yourself these days. I was finally in charge. Sorry, my clicker stopped. Well, it turned out being in charge wasn't anything like this guy. It was more like this and this, and ultimately leading to this. Okay, not literally, but there have been times. I don't know. Can you relate at all? I mean, really. Did you start your business so you could spend your days engaged in conflict management, pushing people to do what they already agreed to do, followed by nights lying awake, worrying about how you're going to make everything work properly? I don't know about you guys, but often that's how it feels. Being in charge is never what you imagine when you're not in charge. All we really want is a measure of success, right? Entrepreneurs don't work to be at the top of some mega monolithic Fortune 500 company. Well, maybe you do, but hang with me for a minute. Entrepreneurs build new things, better things in better ways. That's why we start what we're doing, because we have thought of a better way or something different. Sometimes, sure, we sell the business, but more often we don't, because we simply love what it is that we're doing. We found a way to provide for our families and the ability to carve out our own path. And we're all entrepreneurs. We're business owners, and we want to grow our companies, even if we're not Jack Welch, Barbara Corcoran, Steve Jobs, or whoever, Elon Musk. but we need to be us. We need to be ourselves, not imitators of those other folks. Yet, if you're anything like me, being yourself doesn't always work out so well. I said I got booted from Anderson Consulting, went back to school, started my practice, and watched it grow, right? So not very long after I had those 4 offices and 25 staff, it all fell apart on one very terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. It started just like any other day. I went in the office planning on doing some paperwork, see some clients, have lunch with a friend, be home in time for dinner. Everything was going great. I got the paperwork done in the morning. I was having lunch and catching up with a friend and mentor when he says to me, "So, Fred and Ethel are going to work for Dr. B, huh?" I nearly choked on my fish. I said, "Yeah." I tried not to let him see it. Yeah, they haven't been happy. They haven't been happy lately. He nodded. We just kind of kept talking, but all I heard was a buzzing in my ears, and I couldn't get out of that restaurant fast enough. So, of course, sure enough, I get back to the office. Fred's sitting in his room, and his door's open. So, what do? Knock on it. I said, "So, I hear you're going to work for Dr. B, huh?" His eyes got huge. "What? Who told you?" I just looked at him. I didn't say a word. He was the first to break the awkward silence. He said, "Yeah, man, I'm sorry, but Ethel and I can't keep working so much. Something's got to give." And he kept talking. Again, I just heard the buzzing in my ears. Why? Because between Fred and Ethel, they generated over 20% of my gross revenue. And to be honest, that was right after insurance companies, especially Big Blue, had figured out, wait a minute, we don't have to pay psychologists and master's level at the same level we pay psychiatrists. So they had already cut our pay by 25% for the practice overall. So I did what any good leader would do. I walked back into my office, I closed the door, I collapsed in the chair with my head in my hands. And as it turned out, I wouldn't have to deal with one terrible day. I was about to have a terrible, no good, horrible, very bad year. Fred and Ethel leaving was really the midpoint of a series of events that tore my company apart. It had taken 13 years to build the practice from one person, me, to 4 locations and the 25 staff. We were one of the go-to psychotherapy practices in the area. And in a little over a year, I went from 25 to 8 staff and cut my locations in half from 4 to 2. Questions were burning in me as I watched my company fall apart. What's a good leader? What makes a leader great? Heck, I would have even settled for what makes a leader decent. Why do some people rise to the top and others with just as much potential struggle to survive? And most important to me at the time was, is there any hope that I could become an effective leader? Folks, I'd been studying leadership for 20 years, trying to implement what the gurus said. I'd read hundreds of books on leadership, management, motivation. They were all full of great ideas, techniques that were there to help me become a better leader. Yet when the rubber met the road in my own business, I was failing. It always seemed beyond my grasp. There was always something missing. It took me a while because some of us are slower learners, but I finally had an aha. The light bulb went off. And one of them is completely obvious. Management and leadership are often used interchangeably, but they don't mean the same thing. John Cotter, that's not John Cotter on the screen, by the way, but John Cotter, he's the professor emeritus at Harvard Business School, and he puts it this way. And I'm going to read this to you. Management is a set of well-known processes like planning, budgeting, staffing jobs, measuring performance, and problem solving. Management helps you produce your products and services as you have always produced them, so they are of consistent quality, on budget, day after day, week after week. In organizations of any size and complexity, this is an enormously difficult task. We constantly underestimate how complex this task is, especially if we're not in senior management, which all of you are. So management, and I want to be clear on this, management is crucial, but it's not leadership. He says leadership is entirely different. Leadership is associated with taking the organization into the future, finding opportunities that are coming at you faster and faster, and then successfully exploiting those opportunities. Leadership is about vision, about people buying in, about empowerment, and most of all, about producing useful change. So what? Yeah, managing, leading, they're different functions. Y'all already knew that. But you've only got so many hours in your day, right? As the business owner, how much time do you spend managing and how much time do you spend leading? 50-50? 80 managing, 20 leading, 99 and 1, 100% managing? I don't know. Why don't you throw some answers in the chat box and I'll check with Rhonda and Michelle. Just give it a number. 80, 20, whatever it is.
And a lot of 80-20.
A lot of 80, 20. Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you, for me, back in those days, it was probably 1% managing, 1% leading, and 98% thinking everybody knew what to do and how to do it. And I'll tell you why I thought that. We were all professionals. I thought, hey, we all have basically equivalent degrees. We all want to serve our clients. Everybody knows how to do that, right? Well, that was not it at all. Over time, I got better, but I never could get it right. So I was back to the question of why. If leading is so important, why wasn't I doing it? I mean, I'm average intelligence at least, I hope. I ought to be able to do this. And as small business owners, we need both management and leadership in the right measure at the right times. So I was reading Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art when I had my second aha, or third, depending on how you count it. But now The War of Art, not to be confused with The Art of War by Sun Tzu, or however you pronounce his name. The War of Art is the creative artist's struggle to produce their work, whether it be painting, writing, sculpting, or whatever. Pressfield discusses at length this concept he calls resistance. Now, it's not resistance directly, but it's just kind of this big ephemeral thing that I'm going to talk about. But resistance, it's this invisible force that comes against anyone when they're trying to create something new. Pressfield believes that as soon as you start anything new is a creative endeavor, whether it's painting, sculpting, or a new business venture. And when you start something new, you immediately create, automatically, there is resistance. So to paraphrase him, my aha was the moment you step into a leadership role of any kind, and this does include management, you encounter resistance, and unless you can overcome it, you won't achieve the results you desire. And it's the moment you start. So it does count against management, but here's the difference. In management, you have clear outcomes that people have promised you. They know what's expected of them. They know what they've agreed to, or at least if you're doing management well, they do. And you do encounter some resistance, but you have those concrete metrics. So, but leadership, it always seems like it's just out there, right? It's future focused, so it's just out there. And If when we need to lead, we decide to manage instead, then we're actually giving in to that same kind of resistance. So let me talk a little bit about this resistance. It comes in 3 types or 3 categories. Now, the first one is the nature of leadership itself. The second is what I call external resistance. And the third is internal resistance. So we have the nature of leadership itself, external resistance, and internal resistance. Now, the nature of leadership is like our friend here. We find ourselves pushing against resistance at every turn. Now, the weird thing about the nature of leadership resistance is that it will lay dormant until you actually start to try and lead. Because when you're not leading or when you're not trying to manage other people, there's nothing for them to resist, right? And there's nothing in just the cosmos, so to speak, whatever. I'm not going to get into that, but there's nothing to resist you. Think of it like geese who are feeding in a field beside a road. There's always that one goose with its neck sticking up, looking around, and the rest of the gaggle are eating to their heart's content. But being the leader is like, you're like that goose, your neck's out there. Everyone else is just kind of, they got their heads down, they aren't paying any attention. And you got your neck up there, it's extended, and that's, almost, I guess that's what sticking your neck out means. You have to be on your guard as the leader. It's lonely at the top, or at least for the geese, it's hungry. There's also something about being the leader that invites people to push against us and our ideas and our attempts to make any changes. The I could do better if I were in charge syndrome, or just you really don't know what you're doing kind of syndrome. Leadership responsibilities such as communicating the vision and values, managing your day-to-day responsibilities while you're pursuing that vision, setting the example, being a model for the rest of the team, trying to avoid burnout, trying to stay effective over time, and facing, CEO disease, where you become more and more isolated from everyone else and no one really tells you the entire story. We also battle the nature of leadership is resistance to change, complacency. Basically, it's anything that seems to happen almost automatically as soon as you start leading. That's the nature of leadership resistance. The second one, jumped ahead of myself. Now, one of the most effective ways to overcome your nature of leadership is to develop those soft skills. Sometimes we call them people skills, soft skills, skills like better communication, clearer communication, better delegation, conflict management, active listening, as you're all doing right now, I'm sure. And, the now ubiquitous increasing your emotional IQ, your EQ. Those skills are vitally important for leaders. And the better you are at them, the more successful people will perceive you. And the more successful you likely will be. So it's the people skills, those sorts of things. The second type of resistance is external resistance. Now, a little secret about external resistance, except in very, very rare circumstances, you can't stop external resistance from happening. It's going to show up. It's just going to show up. Things like, I don't know, shall we say pandemic? Other economic conditions. We're heading towards November, election results, revenue redistribution, price cuts, weather and natural disasters, your competitors. Not to mention things like absenteeism, chronic lateness, job performance, poor communication, interpersonal conflicts, hiring, firing, rehabilitating, ineffective meetings, disengaged employees, budget problems, product development, sales issues, production challenges, and complaints from customers. The speed of information technology change, and on and on and on. All of these are external, and you can't stop them from coming. All you can do is learn how to manage them better. And you do that by developing your hard skills. Your hard skills are, now some of those that I did mention are also people skills, but for the purposes of our talk today, hard skills. And traditional leadership management training programs teach tons of these kind of techniques for anticipating and responding to every type of external resistance imaginable. That makes sense, right? Given all of the challenges that a leader faces, it's important and it's vital, I would say, that any leadership development program include hard skills as well, because we need these skills in order to overcome external resistances. Hard skills do tend to be activities associated with kind of a job description, the ability to read your P&Ls and things like that, but also it does involve, as I said, the managing of people. So, and as the leader, you need a certain level of competence at these hard skills, because if you don't have some competence, then people aren't going to follow your lead. So both of these resistances are well known, and rightfully so, and they are extremely important to overcome. So I wanted to pause right now and check my time. Yeah, it's about good. I'm going to take a drink. And I wanted to know if anybody had thrown any questions in so far, or want to throw any questions in.
I don't have any comments on Facebook Live right now.
Okay. All right.
I don't on Zoom either, but
All right. That's because
feel free at any time and we'll.
Yeah, feel free to throw any questions in or any thoughts, or even if you have, at the end, I'm going to have some time here that we could actually talk through some, like if somebody has an example they want to talk through, almost kind of a mastermind kind of thing. So we'll continue on for a little bit more, and then if anybody has one of those, we can do that. So these are well known. These two are well known, but as challenging as they can be, they're not the most challenging resistance, not by a long shot. The most powerful and most difficult resistance to overcome for leaders is internal resistance. Now, I just threw up the Borg because every time I talk about resistance, I think of the Borg from Star Trek. If you guys are not Star Trek The Next Generation fans, then you won't have a clue what that's about. But the Borg always said resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. Anyway, internal resistance is the most tenacious, insidious, and ruthless type of resistance. And it's inside every single one of us. Internal resistance are the things like imposter syndrome, fear of failure, fear of success, conflict avoidance, other doubts or fears and personality traits we have that affect our abilities. A few years after my practice imploded, I was talking to a friend of mine, Michael Port, about the incident. I was still trying to figure out what had happened. Now, to be clear, this guy is Michael Porter. He's a famous economist, engineer, prolific author. I don't know him. This is Michael Port. Anyway, I'm talking to Michael. I'm trying to understand why Fred and Ethel left when Michael says to me, you know, Jeff, most business problems are simply personal problems in disguise. Most business problems are personal problems in disguise. What? This actor turned entrepreneur was telling me, a PhD psychologist, that my business issues stem from my personal issues? I was a PhD psychologist, I'm telling you. I know my personal issues. Are you freaking kidding me? I was actually quite gobsmacked. I just looked at him, dumbfounded. But then, have you ever had that experience where one piece of information unlocks the entire puzzle? I kind of couldn't believe I hadn't figured this out on my own. But my problems with my business weren't about leadership techniques and skills, even though in part they were, but That wasn't the main point. They were about the hidden factor of who I was. The hidden factor. It's what makes you, you. It's that part inside us that we keep safe and secure. And to do so, we create a protective barrier mentally, emotionally, and even physically to keep that part of us safe. We were born into this world pretty innocent and open, but it doesn't take long for our shells to start to develop. Those shells are comprised of the behaviors, traits, and attitudes that develop over our lives. They're the automatic responses we have to situations we encounter, especially if we're feeling threatened in some way. They may change, that shell and protection may change as we age, but the primary goal is the same. It's protect our core self or our true self, or what I call the hidden factor. Our hidden factor stays inside because resistance tells it that if it leaves the shell, it will be destroyed. And honestly, like all best lies, there's a truth that has been twisted. Because when our hidden factor does leave its shell, if we ever get it to do that, it can feel like we're going to die. It feels like everything is exposed. It can be extremely painful. We don't know if people will accept us. We don't know if our tribe is going to kick us out. Are we going to get voted off the island? We don't know if anybody will accept us, and some people won't, but some will. And we survive. And truly, when you come out of that shell, the only thing that gets destroyed is your resistance. As leaders, we have to know ourselves and grow ourselves in order to lead well. You know, I would say 10 to 15 years ago, it didn't matter that much. You could be a leader that never looked at yourself and why you did what you did and why you reacted the way you did or why you didn't follow through on one thing or another. That was fine. Maybe 10, 15 years ago. Why? Because back then, oh, it's way over there. I was going to grab my little phone. We didn't have these. I'm going to grab it. We didn't have these things. Now, those days are over. And with social media and the like, you can find yourself at the wrong end of a viral video before you know what hit you. And even in our own companies, which we founded, which we grew, which we helped prosper, if we do something that others in the company don't like, you've seen it happen. You could lose it. You could lose it all. So if we don't improve our leadership, we are in trouble. And if we don't understand the hidden factor, and I would argue even more important than working on the hard skills and the soft skills, if we don't do that, then I'll put it this way. It's a form of risk management, right? Knowing yourself, knowing and understanding who you are and why you are what you are. It's a form of risk management. And it also, as the leader of your company or your organization, you create the culture of that company. You as the leader, you as the founder, it all flows from you. You can start right now while we're on this call. You can start to understand the internal resistance you're facing. While you're sitting here, every time when anybody listens, you space off for a little while, whatever. Let me give you something specific to think about. Think about your responses to your interactions or why you make certain decisions. Are you easily offended? Do you struggle controlling anger? Do you fail to stand up for yourself? Or do you overpower others in your desires to get what you want? Get some trusted friends, mentors, advisors, maybe people in the networking group to help you identify patterns of your behavior that are destructive, both to yourself and to your employees, maybe even to your family. Notice how you interact with people throughout the day, even outside of work. What type of people are you drawn to? What people do you want to avoid? What is it about them? So it's It's about them, but it's really about your reaction to them. And just as importantly, as Dr. Brene Brown says, what's the story in your head that you're telling yourself about those people and yourself? So here's a real short experiment. When I say, and I'm not going to ask you to put this into the chat because this is something that you may not want to share. When I say the part of me I most need to change is blank, how do you fill in that blank? The part of me I most need to change is blank. What comes to your mind? Take whatever pops in your head, just write it down, just make a little note. And if nothing popped into your head, you can write down self-awareness. Because if you didn't think of anything you need to change, you probably need to work on your self-awareness. All right, so that could be the first thing that you might want to look at, because it could be the first thing you struggle with. You can go further. You can ask yourself the same question, or better yet, ask some trusted colleagues or friends. Ask them what you're avoiding or where they think your blind spots are. You got to be open, and there are skills that you might need to do communication-wise before you're ready to hear the answers, but that would be an encouragement. If you're really brave and you have a significant other, ask them, because they'll tell you. After that, you might have a list of, 3 or 4 or 20. Prioritize those areas and then talk with, again, that trusted person about how you might be able to change. Or if you have a coach, you can talk to your coach. The key here that I want you to understand is the hidden factor dominates and controls everything else. To be the leader that leads well, you have to work on it all. There are hard skills that need strengthening. Typically, though, those are our strongest points already, because that's why we started our company. There are soft skills that need strengthening, and we have to strengthen our hidden factor. Don't forget, it's that hidden factor also that supplies the power. When you're run down, when you're worn out, when you're feeling really, really down, most likely, well, I shouldn't say most likely, I should say often. Often it's because that hidden factor has been pushed down so much that you're just tired, you're depressed, and you don't have the energy anymore. It's what's inside us that drives us, right? And this is part of that. Overcoming internal resistance gives you that energy to overcome the other resistances. So if you work on that, the others, it's easy. We're going to have questions or comments and stuff here in just a second. So if you have any, throw them in there, things you want to talk about. But, when I first, I was telling Rhonda at the beginning, when I first signed up and said, yeah, I'll do October, it's COVID, I'm not going anywhere. Who's going to do anything? Well, turns out where we're at right now, I live in Wheaton, Illinois. And I'm actually down in Austin, Texas in a hotel room because I'm going to go visit my daughter up at Baylor in Waco here and later. So I had all kinds of internal resistance. How I'm going to do this. I get into the hotel room at night and I need 2 monitors so that I can see what I'm doing. And I didn't have that. And I'm like, but I brought all my stuff and I realized, you know what? I am tech enough. Got a degree in engineering for Pete's sake, even though I rarely use it anymore. I can figure this out. So I overcame that internal resistance. I could have called Rhonda and said, Rhonda, I'm sorry, I got this last minute thing, and can you get somebody else? But I didn't want to do that. I didn't think that was fair to her or to you. So I overcame all that, and then I figured out the external resistance. If I showed you my setup right now, you'd laugh because I've ripped the dresser away from the wall and all kinds of stuff. So it's quite jury rigged. But anyway, So you overcome that, and it gave me the energy to get up and do this talk and get to know you guys. All right. So right now, if we can take a few minutes, we can talk about any responses, questions, ideas that people have, or we could talk through something. If somebody said, hey, I've got this issue going on, and we can brainstorm about it.
We do have a couple questions that are coming in from our Facebook Live feed. The first is, do you suggest we ask our employees time to time during employee reviews, or does that make us as leaders look weak? I think that's probably in terms of defining internal struggles or resistance, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that question. Very good. So because it's a, if you ever have worked with psychologists, you know, it's always a, well, it depends. But the depends is, I think you want to do it in a way that doesn't come across as weak. Perhaps implementing kind of a 360-degree feedback. So you don't necessarily ask them straight out if it's an employee that you have that kind of authority over, but you can get a 360-degree feedback where anonymously people give you that feedback of, hey, I see this, this, and this. When you do it that way, it doesn't come across as weak. It comes across as open and willing to learn and change. So that would be what I'd recommend for that. But you don't ever want to go to like somebody that, you know, you're in charge of their salary and everything else and say, can you tell me what all my problems are? So you don't want to do that. Do that with your spouse or very, very good friend or absolutely if you're in mastermind groups, things like that.
Yeah, we have some good comments that kind of relate to that. And one says that they give out surveys to employees twice a year, and that seems to work in garnering interesting feedback. And another has a suggestion box. And I do think having that anonymous is important, because as much as, you know, it's nice to have some communication with your employees, they might not be as forthcoming, obviously, if you have to, you know, say something negative face to face.
Agreed.
That's hard for people to do when, you know, it's your boss. So
Exactly. Yeah, both of those are good ideas. Yep.
Another question is, do you suggest having a business coach to talk about this, or a psychologist?
So self-servingly, I would say a business coach who happens to be a psychologist. But in truth, for these sorts of things, I think you do need someone who has both types of training. There are business coaches who don't understand this, but there are business coaches who do, and who look at, okay, let's look at kind of what's going on in coaching. They tend to talk about it as blind spots, that where coaches have not been trained is making that distinction between, oh, that's just something that you never learned or you didn't know how to do, versus sometimes, not always, sometimes you need to dig deeper to say, well, why is that happening? Why is that happening? I'll give you a real quick example of the difference, right? So I personally, and I use myself as examples just because I don't want to throw other people under the bus, not because I love talking about myself. I'm actually quite introverted outside of being in front of a camera, but so I am highly conflict avoidant. I mean, highly conflict avoidant. And I was going to mention this in a couple seconds, but the primary reason that my company took such a nosedive was because I was so conflict avoidant. Now, your standard business coach would probably say, okay, well, then you need to learn how to have difficult conversations, how to have those conversations and go through and da. Well, that's great. And that works. And that's often enough, right? For me personally, that wouldn't have done it because I was so conflict avoidant. I had to figure out why. And I did figure out why. The short version of it is I was bullied a lot in high school. I was a tiny kid, bullied a lot, and it made me avoid conflict. So there's more to that. None of you guys care. But that's my point. So in that case, I needed someone who understood the deeper part. But here's the problem with therapists. The vast majority of therapists don't understand business. They come in, they see their clients, they leave. So when you can find somebody who has some training in counseling, therapy, psychology, and understand that along with the business piece, that's your best match. I hope does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good answer. Someone also wrote that many people have said that a fault they have is their own ego gets in the way all of the time. How would you suggest getting around that? Or are there exercises that we can do to get through this, because it happens all the time? And there's a related comment. Are there any exercises online or tools available to help guide business owners through that process?
Yeah. So let me go with the ego getting in the way first. There is an excellent book called Ego is the Enemy. It's Ego is the Enemy. It's by Ryan Holiday. It's Holiday, except it has two L's. And Ryan Holiday does a lot of study with in the Stoics. He kind of brings what the Stoics, the Greek philosophers and Stoics used to do, and he brings that into modern day. But Ego is the Enemy is that book. It's really, really good. It's in a trilogy, and one of them is called The Obstacle is the Way. I think that's the first one, and then I can't remember the other one at the moment. So that's a really good book. I would strongly recommend Ego is the Enemy. Also, almost any reading in the Stoics, when ego gets in the way, it tends to be because we feel threatened, and it kicks in kind of our primal instinct, as people talk about the amygdala, fight or flight or freeze. And often as business leaders, fight is the thing that we tend to lean towards. I used to flee, but not anymore. So to understand that, wait, taking that step back, how important is this? Why do I care? The other thing that helps a lot of people is looking at, okay, my automatic response is to get angry or to fight back or to push back or to, as you say, let the ego take control. If you do any kind of meditation, deep breathing, relaxation, or even the whole counting to 10 kind of thing, that's what it was about. Was how about we pause, take a break. What am I fighting for? You got to ask yourself these questions. What am I fighting for? Oh, well, it's my pride. Well, wait a minute. It's my company, or it's my department, or it's this, that, and the other. Now, if you're feeling resistant, because I don't know everybody in here, but my understanding is pretty much everybody here has some sort of business. But it's letting it go. Somebody asked about, well, are there exercises, that sort of thing? Again, my encouragement is listen to or read writings by the Stoics, because they're very good at kind of releasing what is, what happens is happening, regardless of, as I mentioned earlier, external resistance that in a month and a day, well, we may not know the results, but in a month and a day and sometime after that, when we find out the results, all of our businesses are going to have to change one way or the other, right? Either we're going to have to continue with what we've been doing or tweak things, or because of a change in political regimes, things are going to change for us, whichever it's going to be. Doesn't matter which it is. If it's the same, then it's going to be the same but different. And I hope that makes sense. And I'm trying not to get into the politics. I'm just talking about the external forces on your business. And then when the other practices, you ask for an online site, and if I had my act together, I'd say, oh yeah, go here to my site, but I don't. So what I would do is ask that person at the end, my email address will be up there. Send me an email and I will pull those together, and I'll also send those to you, Rhonda, so you can put it out to the group.
That'd be
And
great.
we'll have some resources for that. Okay.
We do have some more questions and comments.
Okay.
Would you agree that part of the challenge with leadership for a lot of entrepreneurs is ensuring you're hiring the right person for the position versus perhaps the least distasteful person that you interviewed?
Yes. Answer, yes. I agree.
Yeah.
Hiring is a challenge. And we so often get desperate to fill the slot. And that's, so from a leadership standpoint, it's, I would say you want to hire for the person, for the personality. And so often we hire, oh, they've got all the skills they need or everything like that. Well, you can teach skills, but you cannot teach personality traits. That does take a psychologist or a therapist to fix that. So you want to, I would recommend you hire somebody who knows, just to use an easy example, somebody who knows nothing about Excel, and then get them the training because they have a great personality and they fit and they mesh with the team, versus hiring somebody who knows Excel but is a total jerk.
Another question. I would think, as you said in your personal story, that expectations play a big part in everyone's story. As you talked about in the beginning of your career, you expected X, Y, and Z. So how do you get around your own expectations and sort of back to the reality that's at hand?
These are all awesome questions. So my answer to that is that it's fine to have the expectations, but tell yourself over and over and over, you only have control of the work you do. You don't have control of the outcome. So, and that actually goes all the way back. Some very wise ancient Chinese philosopher actually said that, or it might have been Buddhist. I think it was Buddhist. You are responsible for the work to achieve those expectations and outcomes, or those expectations, but you don't have ownership over the outcomes. That's what I'm trying to say. So when you let go of the outcome, those expectations can go away. And then the disappointment that goes along with those expectations is a lot less. It's still there. I mean, that's the other piece. We can't control what our initial reaction is, because that's part of who we are. We react the way we react. We react the way we react. But what we can control is the response we give. The reaction is internal. The response is when we turn that reaction into a behavior. So you can be afraid, you can be angry, you can be hurt, you can be happy, whatever. But until you turn that into some outward action or verb, or verbal response, then that's where you have control. So you let go of the expectations early on. Once you know what it is you want, once you know what your expectations are, first thing you want to do is say, okay, but that doesn't matter. All that matters is the work I'm doing right now. And eventually you'll either meet those expectations or you'll miss them. But if you've set yourself up that way, you're still okay.
Jeff, someone had asked what it is that you do as your profession now.
Excellent. I am going to use that opportunity to go to the next slide because we are getting short. So, oops, I hit the wrong button. All right. So since I had that conversation with Michael, I did look closely at myself, and I told you guys it was conflict avoidance. So the practice today is still doing well. I still own the practice. We only have the 2 offices, and there are only 9 of us, but it's still out there. The other thing I do is I do business coaching, and I pretty much focus on the inner work that we all need to do, and that helping people grow in that way. If you are looking for somebody to teach you how to read your P&L and things like that, yeah, that's not me. But so I do that. Like I said, I'm based in Wheaton, and so I don't do consulting in the sense of let me come in and solve a problem in your company, but I do consulting in I can come in and evaluate kind of the dynamics of what's going on with the company and with the interactions of the people and you as the leader and what's happening, things like that, and then work with those who might need to learn some new skills and that sort of thing. Okay, but the practice still goes. Most of it's being run by a practice director, but it's still there.
Great. I just have a couple quick comments that came from Facebook. Another great book about getting out of the way of your ego is called Ego Trip by Glenn, Glynn, Glenn Harrison, Harrison, if anyone is interested in that. And the final comment, and this is one that had occurred to me as well as we were going through this, is just your story is very inspiring and it's very brave of you to share because you know, and I think a lot of people can relate to what you've been through. And I really do appreciate that you shared that. I think a lot of people always want to put on, you know, a front about how successful and great, and that's wonderful. And we love hearing those kinds of stories, but rarely is there, you know, a smooth trip for everyone. So I want to just glom onto that as well, that, you know, thank you for being vulnerable enough to share your, you know, tough times as well.
Oh, thank you guys. And yeah, that's part of my struggle with a lot of the leadership books was that, hey, you know, you're head of a multi-mega corporation and you've got all this staff to do all these things. And I'm down here, you know, it's me, myself, and I, and we're trying to struggle a life. So I appreciate that. Well, let me finish up with just a couple real quick story, just one story. It's called The Tale of Two Leaders. You may know this guy, or you may not. His name is Doug Parker. Doug Parker is the CEO of American Airlines. This is Heather Cho. Heather Cho is the heiress to a huge South Korean conglomerate that owns Korean Airlines. She was their executive VP. I have no doubt Parker's a wealthy man, and Cho is from a billionaire family. Now, Cho was served macadamia nuts in the package in first class on Korean Air, and she wanted them in a bowl. Parker had hot coffee spilled all over his lap by a flight attendant. Cho fired the cabin crew chief on the spot, forced the airplane to turn back around, taxi back to the jetway at JFK Airport to remove him. It caused numerous flight delays for the rest of the day and for other flights as well. Parker helped her clean it up, said no problem. They went on their way. Cho ended up spending 5 months in jail for the problems she caused. Parker got a ton of free publicity on social media and a loyal employee. Now you answer which one is the leader and which is not. The difference between them is what was inside them. Which one do you want to be? Thank you guys. thanks for having me. That's all I've got.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. That was very informative and very helpful. And yeah, like you said, there are so many stories out there of business owners who have gone through the same experience that you did, but they just don't share it. So that was very brave of you to do that today. And I want to thank you for doing that. And I want to thank everyone who's on Facebook Live and here in the Zoom meeting. Again, this was being recorded, and we will make it available later on this afternoon on our website at naperbiz.net. And thank you guys for attending, and have a great day. Thank you so much, Jeff.
All right. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
take
Have a
care.
Bye now.
Thank you.